there, and welcome back to the Total Transition Podcast, where we explore life and change with a focus on humanity at the center of transition. I'm Jordana McGonigal, your host and navigator on this path, where we bring you inspiring stories and practical insights from other veterans who have successfully navigated their own transitions, as well as resources that may offer you a better view of your own. This week, we're talking with Matt Watkins, who, with 17 years of continued service in the Marine Corps, now serves in another way as well through Operation Headshot, a nonprofit focused on helping veterans and military spouses build a brand, expand their network, and thrive beyond the military. So, Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So there's a lot that I want to talk about. If you met Matt, you kind of know he's got a very subdued energy sometimes, but very excited to talk about some stuff that we've had conversations about in the past as it comes to, finding happiness and success and purpose. But before we get into that, Matt, I always start with your story, right? How did you end up going into the Marine Corps? How did you make that decision? And what was that career path like for you?
Sure. Oh, man. That's a long time ago.
We're recalling history here.
Right. So the Marine Corps had been in my sights since about 8 or 9 years old. My dad served way before I was born, but he did 4 years in the reserves. But he talked about it here or there and told some stories about when, he was out doing his training weekends and talked about boot camp. And of course, every Marine knows that you get a boot camp book when you graduate, kind of showing, the progress throughout boot camp. So that was something I remember looking at when I was younger. Also, I come from a history of military folks as well. My grandfather was a Navy veteran during the Korean War, and he was also with the Army National Guard, the Tennessee Army National Guard it was definitely 20 plus years. I don't know exactly how long he served, but he ended up retiring in the early 90s. And I have uncles that were Green Berets and Rangers during the Vietnam time frame, or great uncles, I should say. And yeah, I mean, my brother was in the Army as well. He's 6 years older than I am, but the Marine Corps was something that I wanted to do. And I think it's just because really of looking up to my dad and kind of seeing how it helped shape him as an adult and how it helped shape him as a leader and a father and a business owner. So it's something that stood out to me. And when a funny story, because he was a Marine, my senior, well, I guess back up a little bit. So I'd walked into a Marine Corps office when I was 16 years old. I had my driver's license. I was like, I'm going to go find out more information. Right. And I remember going in and sitting down and they're like, you're not old enough.
Yeah, just a
Come
baby.
back next year. Come back next year when you're 17 and then bring your parents.
Right.
So I ended up not going back, but the Marine Corps is really good at when you walk into an office or you request more information online, you have to put in your birthday, right? Or they get your birthday when you walk in. So when I turned 17, I was getting all this collateral material from the Marine Corps, like, recruiting stuff, trying to get me to come back in the office. Well, at that time, I was, again, 17 years old, junior in high school. I was playing sports. I had a girlfriend. Military was the last thing on my mind at that point.
I forgot about that.
Right. It's still back there, but I'm like, I'm in the middle of high school. Like I got better things to do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward a year, my senior year, I had talked to my guidance counselor and she was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I kind of want to go to Embry-Riddle and get into like aeronautical engineering, aviation mechanics, that type of stuff. And she looked at me and she was like, that's not going to happen.
Thanks.
It wasn't like one of those, like, you're not smart enough. It's like, you haven't put forth the effort to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I graduated high school with a 1.9 GPA, like, not because I didn't know the work. It's because I didn't try. like, it just wasn't, school wasn't fun. Like, I would rather go work, right? But either way, she was like, that's not going to happen. So I was like, okay, well, it's crunch time for me. I got to figure something out. Growing up, my dad was in the entertainment business, so he drove a bus for country music singers in Nashville for from the early '90s till really 2015 or 16, I think. But he had at that time gotten me a couple of job offers. One with Terry Clark, who's a country music singer, and the other one is Brad Paisley, which a lot of people probably know,
Mm-hmm.
as an assistant guitar tech. So being able to go out on the road and do that type of stuff. So in my head, I'm like, that's what I'm doing when I graduate high school. Well, I had walked into the Marine Corps office again just to get more information because I was like, I can do this thing on the road for a little while and then I can join the Marine Corps afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, the recruiter was like, hey, look, that doesn't really make sense. You could do something that could ruin your chances of becoming a Marine. This is something you've always wanted to do. So essentially I changed my mind and I said, I'm going to go ahead and join. Because I was 18, I went ahead and said yes. I went ahead and went to MEPS. I swore in, I did all the things, and I went home a couple days later and I told my dad and at the dinner table, and he just looked at me and he said, I thought we were going to talk about this. And I'm like, no, like, hey,
this is a forgiveness, not permission. Like
right. And I was kind of shocked, and he didn't speak. So I worked for him on the weekends and stuff. He didn't speak to me for 3 days.
He was big mad.
Yeah. And we were at the dinner table a few nights later, and he said, so what are you going to do with the Marine Corps? And I said, I'm going to be a reservist in infantry like you. Like, that's what I want to do. Thinking like, this, maybe we're going to have some progress here. He said, no, you're not. I said, yes, I am. I've already done all the stuff. Like, that's what I'm going to do. He said, no, you're not. He said, get your recruiter on the phone and tell him we're on our way. I was like, okay, great. Being a recruiter now, or a recruiter since then, getting a phone call from a already sworn in future Marine saying that, hey, me and my dad are on our way, we want to talk about some things, is not a good phone call. But either way, we showed up, and my dad looks at my recruiter and says, hey, look, I'm okay with him joining, but he's not going to be a reservist and he's not going to be infantry. And also, since being a recruiter, I learned that reservists typically are like gold for recruiters because they're harder to fill. There's usually a specific quota because of the reserve stations in that area. So my recruiter was like, okay, well, what is he going to do? And he said, I don't know, but if he's going to do it, he's going to do it full time, and he's going to be active duty. And the guy's name is Sergeant Sauceda. He's a retired master sergeant now and still a friend of mine and friend of the family. He looked at me and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I did want to get into aviation. Is there anything in aviation? And he was like, yeah, you have the scores for it. We can get you on an aviation contract. So that's the story of me joining the Marine Corps. I ended up getting active duty aviation mechanic. I didn't get exactly what I wanted as far as a job is concerned, but I'm very thankful that I didn't get what I wanted. I wanted to work on C-130s because I wanted to avoid the ship. And I ended up working on F-18. So I was an F-18 mechanic for 14 years, active duty. 3 of those 14 years, I was a recruiter. But I absolutely loved it. It was phenomenal. And I've since, at 14 years, I transitioned from active duty to the reserves, where I now am a reservist for recruiting station Nashville in Tennessee in 4th Marine Corps Recruiting District. So that's yeah. I don't think he expected me to do 14 years of active duty either. I think he only expected the typical 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But At the time, I would have been able to end my contract. The economy was terrible.
Mhm.
Jobs were not available, so I decided to stay in. And then at that point, it was like just continue to stay. So until 2021, but yeah.
Yeah. So what was it that made, because obviously that's a very long career.
Mhm.
What made you want to switch? What made you finally go, all right, I'm done. It's been fun, guys.
Yeah, the short answer is my kids.
Yeah.
That was the main driver of making that decision. Um, I had a great career. I can't really complain about any of it. Um, and what little there is to complain about isn't really worthwhile, because there's just, sometimes there's personality conflicts
Right.
with leadership specifically. But as far as the military is concerned, those typically turn over every year and a half to 3 years. So,
Mhm.
um, but the main driver was my kid. So I recruited for the Marine Corps from 2015 to 2018. While recruiting, we found out my wife was pregnant in 2016. She gave birth to our first son, September 2016, and I received orders to go to Iwakuni, Japan in 2017. Um, I received the orders in 2017. I wasn't supposed to leave until 2018 after recruiting duty. And I called the monitor and I said, "Hey, I don't want to go to Japan. Like, I don't want to be stationed there. We just had a kid. Like, can I do something else? Can I go back to South Carolina? Because I was in Beaufort, South Carolina for 6.5 years."
Mhm.
And he said, "No." He said, "You can't go to South Carolina, but since you do have a 1 year old," he said, "I'll send you somewhere else other than Japan." I said, "Okay, cool." He said, "You can pick San Diego, Texas, um, or San Diego or Dallas, Texas." And I was like, "I don't want to go to either one of those places. I want to go back. I want to go back to South Carolina." And I said, "Well, let me think about it." So we ended up picking San Diego.
Mhm.
We were prepping to leave Tennessee to go to San Diego in early 2018 when my wife came out of the house crying. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I'm pregnant again." And we love our second son, but he was not planned. Like, um,
I have one of those.
yeah, I mean, he's phenomenal, and I'm really glad that we had him because now they're best friends. They're 22 months apart. It's great. Um, but totally unexpected, right? And
Mhm.
then, no kidding, a few days later, I got told, like, "Hey, the unit you're going to is deploying in September." So,
Of course.
um, of course, why not? Um, so we move out to San Diego, and I can't remember, 2 or 3 months after we got there, our second son was born. He was born June 29th, 2018. And then 2 months after that, I deployed. Um, so my wife packed up the house and moved everything back to Tennessee. And we had a barn dominium in Tennessee that, we built while recruiting. So she was around family and had support and all that stuff. But I realized, or she kept asking me on that deployment, like, "Hey, do you mind just calling and not FaceTiming or whatever?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" And she said, "Because every time Waylon, who's my oldest, he was 2, she said, every time he sees you, uh, I can't get him to stop crying all day long." Like,
Aw.
yeah. He was talking as much as a 2-year-old talks when I left for that deployment, and then he stopped after.
Mhm.
And we put him in speech therapy, which, I mean, you think 2 years old, like, that's normal. They'll start talking, stop talking. He was very friendly and would talk to anyone, didn't matter if they were a stranger or not. um, but just to give an example, at the exchange we would be in the toy aisle on one end, and he would see someone walk on the other end of the toy aisle, walk down, and he would stop doing what he was doing and either get behind me or his mom. and just shut down. And he was not like that prior to the deployment. So I realized that I needed to make a change. Did not leave the Marine Corps on bad terms as far as active duty is concerned. Like I said, I had a great career. I truly enjoyed it, but my family had to be the priority, not the career. So
Right. Right. And that's a big decision. A lot of people make it, but it's still a big decision of
yeah,
this path that I've been on for decades in some cases. And also I love these people and they might need me too. So, how that plays out is always really interesting. Was there something in the transition that you expected when you start the process and it takes a while and you kind of get out and you think, oh, life on the other side is going to look like this, right?
yeah.
Did it look like that?
No, not at all.
Never.
It was everything I had expected. Worst case, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe not everything, most everything. So I started the transition out off of active duty in 2021, and I utilized the DoD Skill Bridge program. And for anyone who doesn't know, the DoD Skill Bridge program is essentially an internship for active duty service members where they continue to get paid as if they're on active duty, because they are. They continue to receive all the benefits, but they're able to intern with a potential company to be hired on it. So I had a executive search firm reach out to me, and I told them about the Skill Bridge thing. And they said, so we could bring you on for X amount of days and, potentially hire you afterwards and we don't have to pay you anything. And I was like, yeah, pretty much.
Magic words.
Yeah. They said, well, we want to hire you. Like that's definitely a thing, but like, obviously that's a perk for us, because then we get to see, how
Right.
you are as an employee. So, I jumped on it and I was like, this is what I want to do. Like I did the whole interview process. It was a small company, 20, 25 people, I think. I spoke with the CEO, and his main question was like, hey, we want to make sure we take care of you. How much do you want to make? And I said, well, I'm not really sure what this position makes, but I can tell you right now in San Diego as an E6, at 14 years, I'm making $116,000 a year. And he said, okay, well, what would you be comfortable with? I said, I'm moving back to Tennessee. Cost of living is a lot lower. I said, 90 grand, somewhere around there would be okay. I'd be good with that. He said, okay, shouldn't be a problem. That's confirming enough to me, right? So I worked for this company for 4 months, and I work my butt off. Like I'm going in office when it's a remote job, right? Just to prove that like I can do it, and I'm willing to, if everybody comes back in the office, whatever. Which I still don't think they're back in office. But anyway, at the end of that 4 months, the hiring manager, which was not the CEO, brought me in and hands me my offer letter. And I'm like, cool, great. So I'm reading down the offer letter, and it's not even half.
I was going to say, can I guess the number? Is
Sure.
it like 40,000?
It was more than that.
Okay, well, good. That's good.
Not much, but it was more than that. It was $48,000. And I was like, my stomach sank. I was like, oh man. Like I just bought a new truck, because that's what we do when we make big changes. Just bought a new truck. I mean, my bills were more than $48,000 a year. Like I'm sitting there thinking, like, how am I going to put food on the table? Yeah. But anyway, that was we ended up getting it changed, and I think they got it up to like 56 or 58, somewhere around there. But I only worked there for 3 more weeks. I went and found another job. Well, actually, a job found me. A retired master gunnery sergeant from the Marine Corps. He was a recruiter instructor, a career recruiter that I had worked for previously, reached out and offered me a job as an IT recruiter. And he said, there's a pathway to be into business development. I didn't know what that meant. So I took it. It paid much more. I worked that job. I think I was there 11 months, 8 months as a recruiter. What, 4 months as a business development manager. And that job was the worst job I've ever had. Like,
Just
so
the type
the
of
business,
position.
yeah, so not at
Mhm.
all what I expected as a business development. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. But I was making 250, 300 phone calls a week, and I felt like I
Right.
was recruiting for the Marine Corps again, and I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, I went from
I could
I
have
went
my
from
other salary still doing this.
yeah, I went from leading. I had the largest power line division, F-18 power line division in the Marine Corps, that I was leading as a sole staff and CO. So it's the only E6, and I had 4 sergeants, and I had 115 total people that I was leading in the Marine Corps. So I went from doing that to not doing
Right,
that,
right.
and it was a weird time. Like I didn't number one, I didn't expect to be doing the work I was doing as a recruiter or business development. I don't know what I was expecting to do, but none of it was that. Um, I was very fortunate. I was never unemployed, so that's why I say it wasn't necessarily the worst case scenario, but I was never unemployed. Um, but I just didn't have a great luck with jobs,
Mhm.
with finding a home, finding a purpose behind my job. Um, I did not realize that there was going to be a huge loss of identity. Like that was
Mhm.
huge. Like that, I think that played a more of a role in the downward spiral of transitioning out than like the employment side did. So
Yeah. We see that a lot, um, within this community. You transition out, you get the first offer. Great, perfect.
mhm,
It's right where I wanted, or it's close enough to what I wanted, or what have you. And the statistics, we all know the statistics, they show, half are going to leave within the year.
yep,
A lot within the first 3 to 6 months, and many veterans just feel like they hop for 1 year, 5 year, even 10 years.
yep.
And it really is about kind of finding your fit. So where was it? Like, at what point in this transition was it that you were like, this isn't me, right? This isn't, I need something for me, not just the paycheck or the salary or the title or what
Yeah.
have you.
So I would say I was probably about a year in and year into the transition. So maybe a little less, but between 8 months and a year. Uh, the way I explain it to people is if you were to put yourself in a pitch black space to where you can't see any light whatsoever, you can't see your hand in front of your face, you lose all of your senses, you can run in any direction and not make it anywhere, yell as loud as you want, you can't hear anything. That's where I was. I was
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by friends and family, had a job, was making money. Um, but I guess now I've learned that that's called depression.
Right. Right. We do have names. There are clinical terms even.
Yeah. But I was there, and I realized that I needed to have a purpose behind what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like don't get me wrong, I was scrounging to find a purpose with the recruiting. Um, and I could kind of find it, but it wasn't sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that my definition of success was not what I thought it was. I thought coming out of the Marine Corps, I needed to make the same salary and lead the same number of people or somewhat close, and have the same weight behind my job. And very fortunately, I realized that I did not need to lead the same amount of people, directly lead them. I didn't need to make the same salary, and I just needed to serve people again and serve people that needed it, such as
Mm-hmm.
the veteran community, military spouse community, because we are unfortunately underserved. And
Yeah.
I realized that, and that's when the whole idea of Operation Headshot came up.
Yeah.
So it
And
was it's
I
crazy.
want to talk about that, but I want first, what is that process like? Right? Like the process, because we work with veterans at the Recon Network who
Mhm.
are in that process, right? I'm lost, I am shut down, I don't know what I'm doing or where I am or any of that, to a point where they're like, no, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving, I'm working, everything's kind of ticking along.
Yeah.
But what was that path like for you? What was that process like to help you narrow down, my purpose is really in serving people and specifically maybe this community?
Yeah. So I, honestly, it took hitting depression.
Mhm.
It took, and then taking a step back and realizing like what I'm doing isn't working. And it sounds super weird, but I I read a book called The Alchemist.
Mhm.
Um, and I read that book while I was working at that IT recruiting company, and I don't know what it was, but that book made me open my eyes and think, this is not what I need to be doing. This is part of my journey 100%, because the book is about um, essentially being on the journey and figuring out what success is to you, what life is all about, all that stuff, and why we go through the things that we go through. I knew that what I was going through was a part of my journey. The job I had was a part of it, but I also, when reading it, I realized that it was time to move. And if I don't make a step, and I don't start, they call it in the book, it's called listening to the signs of the world. Uh, Listening to your conscious, listening to God, however you want to look at it. Um, but something told me I needed to quit my job.
Which
And
is
I had been,
terrifying when you are the
yes.
one that has for years been supporting. And
No,
I mean, let's
yeah,
give
it was,
that the space that it needs, because that is a terrifying prospect for a lot of people.
it was. And I had been interviewing for a couple of companies, like for instance, the company I work for now. Um, but it was over the holidays and I hadn't heard anything.
Mhm.
Like not an email, not anything. And it had been probably a solid month. So I thought, I'm probably going to get a rejection letter or whatever. It's fine. So I quit my job. I'll never forget the day, because I feel so bad, because the guy I worked for he was getting ready to talk about the future and like all these things they were going to do and like this uplifting conversation. And I had to stop him before he got started. And I said, look, man, we gotta talk. And his face went from super excited to super disappointed. Um, Typically that doesn't bother me. That bothered me.
Right.
Uh, but something told me I had to quit. So I quit the job with nothing else on the table. Chelsea, my wife, and I were going to go full force into her for-profit photography business.
Mhm.
We were going to look at getting Operation Headshot started. Um, and then we were just kind of going to roll the dice and figure it out.
Mhm.
Well, no kidding. 4 hours after I quit, probably not even 4 hours, but 4 hours after I quit, the hiring manager at Premise Health called me and she said, "Hey, we want to send you a job offer, an offer
Mhm.
letter." And she laid out the details. And I was like hair stand up on the back of your neck, like like eyes started to water. I was like, "There's no way this is real." Like because I literally have stepped out of my comfort zone. I read a book that I never would have read, and I just listened to my conscience. I listened to God. I listened to the signs of whatever you want to call it, and I took a chance.
Mhm.
And not even 4 hours after taking the chance, it was like the sky opened up.
Yeah.
Um,
But does it feel like that too? Because like here's my feeling would be twofold. It's like, oh, this great new opportunity, and also I just decided I'm doing this other thing, and this is coming at me. Like, how do you decide that that's not a distraction from what you're supposed to do? Because
yeah,
things like that happen through life. It's like, oh,
it,
I finally made this huge decision, and then something falls in your lap that's like, well, wait a minute.
they do, and So Operation Headshot obviously is a nonprofit, but my wife's photography business, she built her business in San Diego. So a lot of what we were going to do was going to be traveling, right? And we had, like, our kids were young, like they were still, I think, 4 and 6 or somewhere around there. Excuse me. And so that played a huge factor into making that decision. Starting Operation Headshot, we had no idea what we were doing, right? None of us had, either me or any of the people that were starting it with me, our board members, had ever been a part of or started a nonprofit before. So it was very much like, we're just going to fly by the seat of your pants, figure it out.
Right.
The position I have at Premise Health, I'm the military program manager. So I do a lot of outreach. I do a lot of recruiting and retention strategies, program building, networking. And I saw that as, number one, something that could provide me a purpose because I'm helping the community that I'm a part of now. Number two, it's going to help grow the nonprofit. And very fortunately, so I was very transparent throughout that whole interview process when I spoke to the CEO, the CHRO, the hiring manager, everybody, that I have a nonprofit. My day job will take priority all the time, but I have a nonprofit. I'm doing this on the side, like keeping them very much aware and in the loop. And I was told by a few different people, Matt, we can't hire everybody at Premise. We can't hire every veteran and military spouse. So if you can help them out through your organization, finding employment and getting them on their feet or whatever it is they need, that's just a benefit to us, right? So that was a big part of the decision making, was knowing, number one, being transparent, number two, knowing that purpose was going to be there. We're going to be able to continue to work and not have to truly work our butts off to try to bring in income with the photography business and the nonprofit, so on and so forth.
Right. So you decide, you get this job, you also decide to start the nonprofit. So tell us a little bit more about Operation Headshot. Like, what was that designed to really do and how to serve that community?
None of which of what we're doing now.
The pivot
that's not entirely
happened.
True. So the idea for Operation Headshot came months prior to quitting my job. Chelsea and I were sitting around the dinner table one night, and she looked at me and she said, I don't know how to fix what you're going through, but I want to keep other veterans from going through the same thing. What can we do? And I'm like, I don't have a clue. If I knew, I would do it for myself, right?
God, Chelsea.
And she said, well, I'm pretty decent at taking pictures. What if I could provide professional headshots to kind of help them in that transition and help them re-identify themselves and help them with employment? And I said, well, that's great. How are we going to get everybody together? And she's like, I don't know. Well, I had just been introduced to this whole networking thing, because you don't do that in the military.
Right.
So it's new to me. I'm like, maybe we could host a networking event and provide a headshots as an incentive, provide food as an incentive to show up. And I work in the recruiting and business development world, so maybe I could get hiring managers and everybody else to be there. Great idea. So that's what we did, and that's how we started. No intention of being a nonprofit, no intention of trying to make an income of any kind, just literally out of the goodness of our hearts and out of our own pockets, provide these things, and that's it. No desire to bring in donations. Like, people had tried to donate when we started talking about this, and we were like, no, like, we're not even set up for that. Absolutely not. If you want to bring food, but don't bring me a check. I can't do anything with that. Oddly enough, when you're not a nonprofit, people are willing to help. When you become a nonprofit, people don't want to give money anymore. So, that's not as many people are willing to hand out a check. They want to see proof and all this other stuff. But that's how we got started, was to literally just be a networking event that provides headshots. That's it.
Mhm.
Fast forward, so that was 2022. Fast forward to 2024, we started our first photography masterclass. So we now teach veterans and military spouses a photography masterclass. It's a $2,500 class that they do not pay for. And they get everything from this is a camera to this is how you start your business in photography. This is how you build a website. This is the importance of SEO, search engine optimization, and all of the things, right?
Mhm.
Well, 2024, we had 5 students, none of which were in Tennessee. They were literally all across the U.S. Only one of them I knew personally.
Mhm.
That's because I worked with him or work with him currently. Um, this year, 2025, we do not have 5 students. We have 30 students.
That's amazing.
It's, it's amazing, but it's stressful. um, no, it's great. I mean, we did not expect the growth that we have.
Mhm.
And obviously we are a nonprofit now. We became a nonprofit in 2023. Yeah, February 2023. Um, and it has all been grassroots marketing, communication. Like we haven't paid for a single ad anywhere.
Mhm.
It's literally just been word of mouth, and we've like I can now say that we're international because we have students that are not in the U.S. Uh,
Mhm.
we have students that are in Sicily that are taking this course. And that is so wild to even fathom, because if you would have asked me in 2021 or even early 2022 when I was making that transition away from the Marine Corps, number one, if I would own a nonprofit or run a nonprofit, number two, if we would be international in year 2,
Right.
I would have laughed. And be like, you're crazy. No, never doing any of that. But here we are, 2 years into being a nonprofit, and we're international. We had a 600% growth in students last year. Um, we raised right under $23,000 in our first year,
Mhm.
um, which was super humbling.
Yeah.
Um, just to see the amount of support and people that are willing to talk about us. I mean, I'm hearing that from these students that I've done one-on-ones with, that they've heard about us through the Warrior Scholar Program. They've heard about us through multiple different podcasts that I've never been on. Um, I had someone tell me that they heard about us in a women's focus group at Purdue University. I've never been to Purdue University. Like all these different places, and I'm like, is this really happening? Like,
Mhm.
it's still mind blowing for me. It's mind blowing for Chelsea and everyone who's a part of the organization. So
Yeah.
that's yeah, that's I don't know if I went off topic or not, but that's it.
No, no, that's fine. That's fine. So real quick though, how has your perception of what success is now? What does that look like now, and how different is it from where maybe you initially transitioned, or just kind of how you grew up thinking like this is what success is going to look like. This is when I'm going to be happy. This is when I'm going to, have all the things that I've ever wanted, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I don't have everything I want. And obviously, I think nobody's happy their whole life. Uh, but my definition of success now is being able to spend time with family, like my
Mhm.
kids, mainly my wife and kids. Um, the fact that I can close my computer at 5 o'clock and I'm not getting a phone call, um,
Yeah.
is phenomenal. I mean, I've it's been warm weather here in Tennessee, so I've been able to literally close my computer at 4:45, 5 o'clock, go outside and throw a baseball with my kids.
Mhm.
Um, we're building a house. I don't know if we can afford the house that we're building, but we're building a house. Uh, um, we live in 900 square feet. When you have 2 kids, that's very small.
But it's not
Uh,
enough square feet.
so I know people do it, but we're building a house on the property that we own, and I work a job that provides purpose. It provides community. The folks I work for at my day job at Premise Health are phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, they're extremely supportive. I'm running a nonprofit that people understand our mission, and they want to help us achieve and achieve that mission, and they want to help other veterans and military spouses achieve their goals. I mean, I would say my definition of success isn't about making money anymore. It's about just helping people. Like that's like if I could do all of this and not get paid, that would be great. I would do it. But unfortunately, you know, there are bills. Like that's a thing. So I do have to get paid.
The pay matters a little bit, but
yeah. But this is all stuff I would do for free. Like and you know, honestly, with the nonprofit, we do 90% of it is free. The rest of it's out of our pocket. So I'm living my successful life right now.
So. And that's huge that like when you could reach that point, that is huge. When even through stress, like if you can talk about being stressed out and still smile, you're okay. Like that's kind of where, you know, we coach our guys too. So one more question before we wrap up. And I ask this of everybody on the show, and it's probably going to stump you for a quick second, but knowing all that you know now and knowing the process that you had to go through to gain that knowledge, what is the biggest piece of advice that you would share with someone, you know, with Matt 4 years ago, or with someone in that same position? Like, I don't know whether I should get out or not. I don't know. I did get out. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in the black void, and I know that there are people that care, and I just don't care. Right. So what do you tell that person?
It's not just, I mean, there's not just one thing I would say, but
spill it all. Give us all the knowledge.
Number one, you're not alone. You're not alone, and you're not a burden to anyone. For those that are going through the depression times, right? The black void. If you think you need to reach out to someone, don't think about being a burden to them. Reach out. Because I promise that you're more, there's probably a better way to say this. You're more of a burden if you're not here.
Right.
You're more of a burden if you're not here than you are when you call. And for those who are not in that black void or not going through those depressive times, if someone crosses your mind that you haven't spoke to in a while, or maybe you talked to them yesterday, if someone crosses your mind and you have a split second thought that you should talk to them again or call them, pick up the phone. They need to hear from you. There's a reason why they crossed your mind. Whatever that is, I don't know. Maybe they just accomplished something that's great. They're doing something really good in their life. Maybe they hit rock bottom that second. I don't know, but there's a reason that they crossed your mind. So you should probably pick up the phone and call them. Pick up the phone and call them. Don't text them. Call them. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best. That should be everyone's strategy going into anything. I was not prepared for the worst case scenario going into my skill bridge. I was not prepared to get an offer letter for $48,000. I was not prepared to quit 3 days later or 3 weeks later. Even going into a job that I thought was going to be great, I was not prepared for that job to be what I thought it was going to be in business development. And lastly, this is kind of an old saying that I've since brought back for myself, is never give up on something you can't go a day without thinking about.
That's a good one. That is a really good one. Yeah.
I remember being a fairly senior sergeant and trying to get promoted to staff sergeant back in 2015, 2016. And I printed out the staff sergeant chevron and I put that quote on top of it and I stuck it on my desk and I just looked at it every day. And that was a motivator enough for me to go PT, to get in better physical fitness shape, to do the education that I needed to do to get promoted, to make sure I was on recruiting then, to make sure that I was making all of my numbers as far as making the phone calls I needed to make, going out and talking to the kids that I needed to talk to. But never giving up on something you can't go a day without thinking about is probably my best piece of advice.
Yeah.
Even when it's the hardest, even when you think it's not even worth it, you're probably a day away from success. So,
and there's a reason it's stuck in your head.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. But those are my 3 pieces of advice to folks that are either transitioning, veterans that are lost, and even military spouses, because they go through the same hardships.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Well, I will second everything you said. Absolutely. You know, you aren't a burden to anyone. You definitely aren't alone. In fact, you're so not alone that we have 45,000 different veteran resources out there. You know, just look at the guests on our podcast. You are not alone. So definitely great advice for our listeners. And Matt, I really appreciate you coming on today, just talking with us and telling us your story. It takes a lot. People don't think about it, but sometimes it takes a lot to be vulnerable and just kind of tell the process that you had to go through to get through some of what life threw at you. So, man, thanks so much for your time and for showing up today.
Of course. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, that's another one. We're going to wrap with Matt Watkins. Please check out the website at Operation Headshot. Connect with Matt on LinkedIn should you choose to do, and make sure to tune in again in a few weeks for our next episode. Thanks so much.